I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and for this video I've invited a friend of mine. He is the Chief Cyber Curmudgeon for S-Fractal, which he founded, Duncan Sparrell. Hello, Duncan.
Hey, Ed. How you doing?
That's probably one of the best titles we have ever had here, Chief Cyber Curmudgeon.
I like it. I am a curmudgeon, as you know. So,
So you and I are a couple old phone company workers on pensions,
yeah,
right?
You're a youngin'. I remember when you were a wee whippersnapper. I'm probably the only person who can say I've had you work for me, I've worked with you, and I've worked for you.
Well, you never worked for me. It was always with. Maybe in some chart.
Well, at least some chart, at least according to the charts.
Yeah. Now, one of the projects you're working on as the chair of one of the subcommittees.
Correct.
OpenC2. Tell us what that, I bet there's people who don't know what that is.
So, a few years back, I was, weirdly enough, having a beer with a fraternity brother of mine. I asked him what he did, and he goes, I'm working on this project for the National Security Agency. Oh, what is it? OpenC2. I said, oh, what's that? He goes, well, they're trying to standardize on how to talk to security vendors, because, you know, you talk to one firewall vendor, it's a block. You talk to another firewall vendor, it's a deny, which is sort of stupid. So they're trying to set up a standard. I said, wow, I wish they would have had that when I worked for AT&T, because you get stuck with vendor lock-in, because you build up all your gear around a particular way to do it. And now that we're moving to cloud and everything's virtual, that's really important. So I got involved in the effort. It's called OpenC2. It's moved sort of from being a government-sponsored thing to now being an international standards body, a group called OASIS. It's a technical committee. It's currently now out for public review. And what it's trying to do is standardize the language by which you command and control security equipment. So open, because we want it to be an open standard, and C2 for command and control, because it started out with the government and they speak C2. And that's what it is. So,
how do the vendors feel about this?
It's an excellent question. Some of them are behind it because their customers are beating them up about it. It's mostly a user community driven effort. The major contributors in the area are the Department of Defense, Bank of America is another one of the co-chairs, AT&T is deeply involved, so there's a couple of universities involved, and there are a lot of vendors that do participate because I just said, you know, a bunch of major companies who buy a really lot of stuff, so obviously they listen to their customers. So some of them are sort of begrudgingly going along, and some of them are noticing, hey, this is really going to make a difference and do it. And a lot of it depends sort of on where they're coming from, but I think everyone's getting on board with it.
I think if you have a product that is technically sound and really works, good algorithms, good functionality, you probably don't mind. But if you have like kind of syntactic sugaring around something that maybe you're creating a smoke screen for what you're doing. If you, tell me if I got this right, if you standardize the way it's described, it could be that some of the shine goes away. I'm just trying to think why somebody might not like it.
Well, any vendor obviously would like to lock in their customers. And so this is one of the ways they do it. You sort of get built in, stuck with their infrastructure, and you get stuck with it. This does allow you to mix and match more. So vendors do have to compete more on their actual features as opposed to on the fact that you bought them last year, you got to buy them again this year. Sunil Yu, who's the Vice President of Innovation at Bank of America and is one of the chairs of the committee, is always says we're commoditizing the interfaces that don't really matter to the functionality of the product, but they matter to the inner working with others. And that's really what we're doing, and it makes a difference.
Now, this is an international group. Seems
correct.
Like every time I talk to you, you're in a different country.
I do enjoy travel.
So the international, cultural, and so on don't seem to be an issue in building, or maybe they are.
No, I mean, this group is a international standards body, but it is mostly U.S. based. We have to have meetings at, you know, the official meetings, which are once a month that we vote on stuff, we have to have one at 11 a.m. and one at 7 p.m. because we literally got to cover the globe, and you can't pick a time that's a good time for everybody in the globe. So they've compromised on 2 times. So it's a sort of weird meeting because it's a 2-hour meeting that takes place 11 to 12 and 7 to 8 from an East Coast time viewpoint. But we get stuff done.
If people are watching, is the website a good place for them to get information? Maybe you've had
it is, or just if you
pop it up on the screen.
Yeah, if you Google OpenC2, the thing you'll probably get first is something called the OpenC2 Forum, which is what it started out at before it moved to Oasis. So there's actually a website called openc2.org, but that will lead you to the Oasis site. And if you Google Oasis OpenC2, you'll find it easy enough. But it's currently out for public review, so anybody who hears this and thinks that, hey, we screwed up something in it, please read it and tell us it, because it's a new evolving thing. We're just coming out with it. So
let's talk tech a little bit.
Okay.
Some trending. You and I have both been at this a while. We watched telecommunications become internet, become mobility, become cloud. That's sort of right.
Yep, become Internet of Things. Don't stop yet.
Things, yeah. What when you're describing that sort of that journey, is it mostly positive? Is it negative from, say, an engineering, quality, security, reliability perspective? What are some of the big things? Do you think we're way better at tech now than we were maybe 20, 30 years ago? Or do you think it's the reverse?
I think, as usual, it's a sine wave and there's ups and downs. I think we're currently more complex than we need to be. I don't know if you remember back when the internet was still forming and I was involved in Frame Relay and we're having all these arguments about the internet. There was a lot of complaints that, hey, the internet's too complicated, it'll never take over. We're going to stick with virtual private lines and Frame Relay and all this stuff. And the value of the internet was that it was very complex in total, but any given transaction was fairly simple. I think with cloud and Internet of Things, we're going to start getting back to that way, and I think security actually will start becoming simpler because I think things like OpenC2 will start standardizing interfaces, but I also think we'll start recognizing we need to get back to single responsibility principle. Software is the bane. I'm a software engineer. Software is the bane of all evil because software engineers get the push to put out too much too quickly. We got to focus more on, hey, we got to do things right and put out the right quality stuff, which we're capable of doing, and will be easier if things are simpler. And I do think cloud and Internet of Things are actually going to make things simpler. They're going to make things more smaller and transactional as opposed to the sort of complicated server messes we have today.
Is DevOps simpler and better than the old waterfall SDLC?
It's more efficient at producing more value sooner, which means, as you know, I'm always a preacher of money drives everything. We should be looking at security from a money risk viewpoint. We should be looking at development from a total cost of goods viewpoint. I do think we'll get there. I think DevOps is better at making a better product sooner, but it's not perfect. And we do, just because it's could be this much cheaper, we need to make it, still cheaper, but include everything in it, like security, which tends to be a bolt-on, which you can't really do. And speaking of the, security and Internet Things stuff, we're moving. I'm a big advocate of I Am the Cavalry. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization, but it's sort of from the saying, hey, the cavalry isn't coming, so I am the cavalry. We all got to do security ourselves. And it's a group of people that are looking out for, Josh Corman found it, and he likes to say, it's where bits and bytes meets flesh and blood. Because, when our first PCs came out, or in fact, my PC today, if it got hacked into, it's not the end of the world. What's going to happen? My presentation isn't going to look good or something like that. I happen to sleep on a CPAP machine, which is connected to the internet. You hack into that, I stop breathing tonight, I die. Okay, it's a whole different world now that we need to worry about. You hack into your cars, you cause them to crash. So it really is a safety critical issues we've got to start worrying a lot more about. So we just got to design the software right in the first place. I think we're getting there. I do think we'll move to more true economic-based stuff. Use loss exceedance curves. Use true risk analysis, not red, yellow, green charts. Who cares about that?
Are you a proponent of like the DevSecOps or SecDevOps? I see all the different ways of permuting the word sec into DevOps. How do you feel about all those initiatives?
My issue is, why is sec needing to be included as a separate word in there?
I think to make a point.
You don't put quality in there, right?
No,
you remember the 80s? We had total quality
I know.
management, quality managers. Now everyone goes, well, just whatever your level of quality you want, just build it in that way. We'll get that way with security. It's a new field. We don't know what we're doing. We'll get the hang of it.
Yeah.
That's the fun thing about being at the start of a field. You get to see the growth curve. Kids who today have a lot harder problem. We already solved all the easy problems.
You think so?
Would you imagine trying to hack into one of today's computers versus when we first started? At the time we thought it was hard, but it's harder now because we're actually doing things better.
One thing I always think is, now that I teach and I reflect back on trends much more than I used to. Yeah, I think you're 30 years teaching now. When I look at the discipline, a lot of it I learned from you in telecommunications. The idea that you build things to last.
Yep.
What was it? Those old 4Es had the last was like 40 years or something like that?
No, they were only supposed to last 20. They're still carrying half the telephone traffic in the country
funny,
today.
like you said,
and I designed those in 1978.
Think about that.
I have
phrase.
hardware still in use that was supposed to die 20 years ago, and it's still working.
No, it's like a Volvo that just keeps running.
Yeah.
But I mean, the discipline that went into building those things.
Yeah.
where they run for decades with no failure. There's no such thing like that as that in technology anymore, right?
Well, it's because they don't make it
like that.
They don't make it a if you
Airplanes,
make it a requirement.
You like to think maybe, are really built to not fail. But most of the technology, the gadgets, the other things that we buy, it seems like they're built to work for a couple of years.
Consumer is different than infrastructure.
But even the infrastructure support.
Well, a lot of the infrastructure providers are sort of counting on the Moore's Law technology curve, making it obsolete. So if it's only going to last 3 years, why build it for 20? But it should be built that way.
When you think of the way mobility has gone the last, say, 15 years or so, don't you think it's kind of weird? It's sort of like you build a generation of technology, throw it out, another generation of technology, throw it out.
Well,
LTE's better.
But hopefully they're also changing it by going to more software-defined, more commodity-based,
5G is better,
which is not necessarily in the vendor's best interest to do it, but it's clearly in the carrier's best interest to do it. So the ONAP work and the work going on to try and standardize, so all the telecommunication companies of the different countries sort of work off the same open source frameworks. I'm a big proponent of open source, as you know, but I do think that is going to start commoditizing some of the things that, they won't have the vendor lock they used to.
Are you an SDN fan?
Sort of. I'm mixed on SDN.
Expand a little.
I like software. I do like open source. There is a certain amount of SDN that is open source. There's certain decisions were made at certain times that I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I'd go back and make them slightly differently to make them more vendor agnostic and more standard than they are. I still think it's a little too locked into certain ways, but that's just my opinion.
Architecturally, like the way?
No, it's more in the details.
Because when I think SDN, I think my brain immediately goes to a picture of a controller with a north and southbound interface and really reasonably well-defined functions for each. That seems like a good idea. It reminds me of SS7.
Right, but if you start dropping in some of those functions, and could you really pull out vendor one's thing and drop in vendor two's thing directly?
Yeah, maybe
the answer
not.
is, well, when you get down into the gory details of some of the config files and the things you're downloading, you got to redo stuff, and just a few tweaks. Again, hindsight's always perfect.
Now, you alluded to open source. Why do you think it's such a good initiative?
Well, I do think it's a lower total cost in general. So it's always easier to steal things from other people than it is to use it yourself. I abhor the name free open source software.
That's a Richard Stallman concept.
So free or one of the consortiums now calls it FLOSS, which is free/libre open source software. And it's not free. If you're going to use it, you got to put the effort into maintaining it. You got to put the effort into keeping it updated. So
open source is the right term.
Open source is what I prefer. Right. And I do think if you're going to develop something, unless you have the best idea since sliced bread and it's the idea that's the thing you're protecting, 90% of the software you build should be usable by other people, which means you should be able to use other people's and just go from there. I do think it's just a better model. The perception that closed source is more secure, I think, is a total fallacy. I think you should start right off the bat with it's a given the bad guy has your software. I don't care how you protect it, the bad guy has it. I go to enough hacker conferences and hang out with hackers enough that basically any system is vulnerable if you try hard enough.
Do you think malicious nation states have Windows source code, for example?
Yeah, I think all nation states. Malicious is a term that's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. I guess my definition of malicious.
We work for a malicious nation state for some people's opinion.
You know what? I would think malicious less at a political level and more at, when we all joined IEEE and we signed that little form that said we will be respectful of technology and we'll try and advance, all those nice terms we teach graduate students. I think my definition would be any initiative that seeks to use or harm technology in a way that doesn't advance society is not acceptable.
I agree with that, but by that logic, I've been a black hat as well as been a white hat, because it's just all your definition of a good guy. And an Iranian hacker would be the opposite of me. They think they're doing it for their side correctly. I think I'm doing it for my side correctly. But my first exposure to computer security was in the first Iraqi war, when I had the right clearances because I did White House support stuff work. And they said, hey, we need you to fly down to the Air Force Information Warfare Center,
San
which I'd
Antonio.
never heard of,
Yeah.
and help these guys and help them hack into stuff in Iraq during the First World War. Now, we were at war, so it was a wartime. We were at war. You're allowed to do that sort of things at war. But
Bush
we
won.
did do that sort of stuff. Bush won,
won,
yeah.
Interesting
So.
stuff. Hey, predictions. What do you think? Like when
My
people
first
ask
prediction
you-
is I'll be wrong. But I am optimistic on the security front, which is my expertise. I'm actually optimistic. I think I give it another 5 years, and security will be a lot like quality was in the 80s. We'll finally get the hang of. We need to decide for any given thing what our risk tolerance is, design it to that risk tolerance, and just do it. And it won't be as horrible as it is today.
Be more integrated and embedded.
More integrated in, because it'll be part of the total cost of ownership. Companies can't afford to have their stuff hacked anymore. It used to be no one cared. Now people care. So, at a cocktail party, you can discuss security now. I mean, 10 years ago, everyone looked at us like we had, two heads when we started talking about, hey, people could hack into your stuff. They're like, well, who cares? Now people care. So.
Let's close with your advice on retirement. You're flunking retirement because you're
I
so
am
busy
succeeding
and running around the world
wonderfully
all the time.
at retirement. First of all, I highly recommend
what's
it.
the
I have
secret?
no idea how I had time to work, actually. But,
what's the secret to successful retirement?
well, one is work hard. I mean, I did have a long, successful career. AT&T paid me quite well.
Yes.
I cannot complain at all about that. ExxonMobil paid my wife even better, so I certainly can't complain about that.
nice.
So
Shout out to Patty.
Yeah, shout out to Patty on that one. But don't, we've had some friends that sort of retired and fell off a cliff. Do stay active. I happen to like cybersecurity, so I stay active in it. Also like to travel, so we go do stuff like that. And I do volunteer work, and it's fun.
I just
highly
feel like if you
recommend it.
have, you redefine your mission.
I don't have to wear a tie.
Yeah, well, I wore a tie at a banking customer today, so I wore my bank tie today. But I think if you have post-retirement, having a mission, purpose, really
Right.
important. For some people, it might be caring for a family member.
Yeah.
Others, it might be their community. Others, a career. For us, it's still kind of techie stuff, right?
And stay active physically, and stay active, have fun too. Don't forget to have fun. Don't work. Don't. There's a difference between retiring and having a second career and doing a little of each.
Next time you're in the city, come give us an update.
Certainly.
It's nice to see you, Duncan.
All right, great.
Thanks for coming, man.
Sure.
Great. And we will see you next time.